So, just one quick thing before we start. How long have you been working in psychotherapy?
Since 1993. A long time.
All right. So with that, I of course wanted to bring you in because I've done personal training for the last couple of years. Mental health is obviously your area of focus, and so just to start, we know that there's a connection between fitness and mental health. Would you mind just elaborating on that?
Well, there are studies that have shown that exercise is effective in countering anxiety and also in countering depression. And the underlying, biological basis of that is the various chemicals that are adjusted, that are responsible for mood, and are adjusted in the brain from exercise, including the lowering of, the increasing of endorphins, the management of serotonin, and the reduction of cortisol, which is a stress hormone.
All right, and we kind of talked about this prior to filming, but some of the reasons that people actually become obese can stem from mental health in the sense of people binge eating who have anxiety and depression and other types of conditions, or even something like having an abusive childhood, being in an abusive relationship, and I assume there's a lot more examples.
Yes. There's a lot of people who manage their emotions, their unpleasant, unwanted emotions with intake of one sort or another, which could be alcohol, or it could be drugs, or it could be food. We're also a sedentary culture, which we weren't 50 or 60 years ago. In World War II, the average family lived and worked on a farm. So we've become much more sedentary, and we eat a lot more processed food. But a lot of people do manage their anxiety from, stress eating is a term that, even is familiar even in just common culture. There's also, as evidence in the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, which was a long study with a large number of people, that connects childhood abuse of any sort to overweight and diabetes, among many other things. And the doctors Anda and Felitti, who were the authors of that study, Dr. Felitti worked with, I forget whether he worked with Kaiser Permanente or the CDC, but one of his early discoveries was that in certain cases, obesity wasn't a long, slow, gradual increase in weight, but a very quick rise in weight that had to do with females or males being molested sexually, so that they put on weight as a protective, as a protective maneuver to make themselves, one assumes, less viewed from a sexual point of view, and also when people get obese enough, their secondary sexual characteristics like breasts and hips and waist are masked by it. So there's a lot more I can say about that, but for our purposes, yes, childhood trauma and stress in the present often contribute to obesity.
All right, a lot of information there. So we're obviously not about to diagnose anyone over the internet, but to maybe anyone who's in a not so good place is what we're describing. And you've talked before, you should be seeking counseling, whereas seek therapy, whereas a lot of people either one get the therapy done and then don't take the advice, or they just don't get therapy altogether and put it off for years, or they just try to self-medicate it in some way or another, which I'd imagine is even worse.
Yeah, okay, so, one of the things in the original study that preceded the ACEs study is that people lost a great deal of weight and quit the program anyway. And that's how we came to discover the relation between childhood sexual abuse and obesity is for those people, obesity is a solution, not a problem. So if you engage in, the body by calisthenics workouts, and you find your body changing, if you find that it makes you anxious, or you find that it makes you worried, or you find that success makes you want to quit, then that's a good time to go talk to somebody about it, to see, just stuff may be revealed as you work out, and the answer should not be to stop working out. It should be to address the underlying issue. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, that's perfect. Just because of the time we're getting this done, any tips on people for mentally coping with the COVID incident?
Yes. You can only take things one day at a time anyway. So if you're doing what you're supposed to do, like we measured, we're 6 feet apart. We're also outdoors where it's less spread. You're washing your hands more frequently before eating, after eating, and throughout the day. And you're taking precautions like wearing a mask when you do go out to shop. Then there's not that much to worry about. Those seem to be effective. And in terms of isolation, we're all getting better with Zoom and Google Chat. It's important to keep in touch with other people, and of course, it's a great time to start exercising because you can do it at home. And just as you can overeat to the point where you get type 2 diabetes, and if you exercise enough that you lose weight, you can reverse the type 2 diabetes, and you can reverse the weight gain, and you can reverse anxiety or work against anxiety, work against depression. It's an important time for self-care. So whatever that is for you, whether it's playing music or dancing or exercising or prayer or meditation, watching comedies, whatever it is for you, self-care is not optional right now. It's an important time to be very mindful that I must engage in self-care because so much stress is automatically coming our way.
Well said.
Thank you.
All right, the very last question, and this is purely a matter of opinion, I should mention. So if we take a look at the obesity crisis that's obviously happening in this country for quite a while now, we sort of think of maybe the extremes that we've seen in our country prior to that. So we've seen back in the 60s and 70s the Arnold era, where the only sort of legitimate source of workouts and fitness was bodybuilding magazines, which anyone who grew up in that time, is 50 sets just on biceps, barely being able to move your arms the next day. And fast forward to the 80s and 90s, we saw the anorexia and smoking era. And fast forward to nowadays with the obesity crisis, and also on the note that we've talked about, people with mental health problems don't seek therapy. Do you think that actually, I've said the obesity crisis, I believe, will pass in our lifetime. That is a subject for another time. But on that note, do you think there could be a mental health crisis on the level of the obesity crisis, or either of those other two extremes, if not greater?
Well, where the field has gotten right now is recognition that trauma underlies a lot of the difficulties that people have, and that if you just treat the results of the trauma, it's like taking aspirin for the fever that comes with the flu. And the trauma would be the underlying flu. You have to treat the underlying. If you treat the flu, the symptoms will go away. And in a similar way, the field is coming to understand that that trauma is very common. A lot of things can be caused by significant enough level of trauma. So I think that's where we're getting in the field right now. And you're right, there was a time in my lifetime when everybody smoked everywhere. In my first internship, we smoked on the unit, we smoked on the on the elevator, and it's kind of unthinkable now. Things do change a person. So I'm happy to hear that you predict that obesity will be on the decline in coming years, because there's a lot of physical health and emotional health problems that come from being obese.